Hello everyone and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. My name is Alex, and in 2021 I was working the morning front desk shift at the Roadway Inn, located in the southern area of Venice, Florida. It was the typical roadside motel, about 30 years old. Exactly the kind you picture near any Gulf Coast highway. 2 floors, outdoor hallways, salt-stained stucco walls, and a neon vacancy sign that buzzed louder than the air conditioning units themselves. I was 34 years old and trying to finish my community college classes at night, so the 7 a.m. schedule suited me perfectly. Most mornings were peaceful, guests checking out, fresh coffee brewing, and brief chats with the housekeepers before they started their rounds. Tuesday, April the 20th, began exactly the same way. The sun was already blazing, and the palms in the parking lot barely moved. Tina Strader, our head housekeeper, clocked in at 8:20. She was 46, a mother of 4, and had recently become a grandmother. She always carried a huge thermal mug filled with sweet tea and greeted me with the same joke. If the rooms don't scare me, the lobby coffee will. I buzzed open the laundry room door so she could grab her supplies, then printed her list of occupied rooms to inspect. One line stood out, room 109. The guest had arrived late the night before, paid in cash, and presented only a Georgia ID. His name was Stephen Havilka, about 30 years old, no vehicle plates on file. I remembered him because he asked if we had full cable, for when he stays a good while. Tina glanced at the list and shrugged. Cash payers always leave the worst tips, she muttered, pushing her cart toward the east wing. By 8:45, the courtyard was silent except for the drone of cicadas. I stepped outside for a smoke and saw Havilka leaning on the railing in front of room 109. Shirtless, staring at the parking lot. His eyes were pale, his beard patchy, the look of someone who'd spent nights riding buses. He noticed me watching and smiled a little too long. I gave a brief nod, stubbed out my cigarette, and went back inside. At 8:49, Tina sent a text message to her husband, Jeff, as she did every break. Almost done with the first room. Love you. She slipped her phone into the side pocket of her apron and used her master key to open room 109. A minute later, the exterior camera recorded Havilka entering behind her and closing the door. I didn't see that footage until the police showed it to me, but the timestamp 8:50 is burned into my memory. The housekeepers carried walkie-talkies, yet none of us heard a distress call. The walls in that wing were made of cinder block. No screams could pierce through triple drywall or the constant hum of the built-in air conditioners. What happened inside that room lasted 14 minutes. At 9:04, the door opened. The camera showed Havilka stepping out barefoot, holding his sneakers and a white towel. He looked calm, as if heading for ice. Then he walked down the back stairs and left the property. At 9:15, Jeff called the front desk. "Tina's not answering my messages," he said, his voice worried but polite. I told him she was probably in a room with poor reception and offered to pass along a note. 10 minutes later, he called again. This time his voice was cracking. "She never stays silent." I promised I'd check by radio. I grabbed the walkie and broadcasted, "Tina, guest in 204 needs something." No response, only a hollow buzz on the channel, then silence. I left the desk, ran to the laundry room, and asked Maria, the other housekeeper, if she'd seen Tina. She shook her head. She'd been stripping sheets upstairs. We decided to split up. Maria would check the north wing, and I'd go to room 109, convinced I'd find Tina chatting with the guest. The hallway outside 109 smelled of cheap cologne mixed with bleach. Tina's cart was neatly parked beside the door, but her tray of cleaning bottles was on the floor, as if she'd left it in a hurry. I knocked twice, no answer. A nervous tingle crawled up my spine. Housekeepers never left their carts unattended. I slid in my master key and opened the door. The curtains were drawn, the TV off. The bedspread was half pulled and covered with large dark stains, which my brain first interpreted as spilled soda, until reality set in. The bathroom light spilled across the short entryway. On the tiles lay Tina's cleaning gloves, the fingers clenched. At the end of the narrow space, the closet door was ajar. Something kept it from closing. It was Tina's legs. I froze. I wanted to back out, call 911, do anything but move closer. Yet I looked. She was lying on her side, knees bent, her apron twisted around her waist. Her face was swollen, her lips purple. A towel was jammed deep into her mouth, forcing her jaw open. Her unfocused eyes still moved. She was alive. The next few minutes are a blur in my memory. I ran back to the lobby for my phone, dialed 911 and tried to give the address while sprinting back, voice breaking. Maria met me halfway, saw my face, and began praying in Spanish. We tried gently pulling the towel free, but it was lodged too tightly. Tina's breathing was wet and ragged. Her yellow polo was soaked in blood that also streaked the closet wall. We held her hand, repeating that help was coming, while helplessness swallowed me whole. When the Venice police and paramedics arrived, they ushered us out. I stood in the parking lot shaking while officers sealed off the hallway with crime scene tape. Minutes later, Jeff's pickup truck screeched into the lot. He ran toward the tape, shouting Tina's name. An officer stopped him, pulled him aside, and spoke quietly. Jeff dropped to his knees, slammed his fists on the asphalt, and screamed, a sound too raw to be human, too deep for language. I still hear it whenever a motel smell feels wrong. Tina died at the hospital a few hours later. The coroner determined that the towel had completely blocked her airway, and the blows to her head and chest showed she'd been beaten into submission. Detectives crowded the motel all afternoon, combing through our hard drives and searching every vacant room. The suspect list narrowed fast once they saw the hallway video. Havilka hadn't checked out. He had simply walked away, shoes in hand. The footage gave them a clear face. By nightfall, bulletins were circulating across every patrol car in Sarasota County. I went home at dusk, my clothes still stained with rust-colored blood. I showered twice but couldn't scrub away the metallic smell from my hands. That night I skipped class and sat on my porch chain-smoking as the sky faded from Gulf blue to black. The motel, the closet, Jeff's scream. Each scene replayed in my head like security footage. Police caught Havilka 2 days later, hiding in a shed behind an abandoned duplex in Northport. He still had the same Georgia ID, and the soles of his sneakers were smeared with Tina's blood. During interrogation, he offered no motive, no apology, just empty answers. A state attorney's aide later said he simply wanted to take another human life. The Roadway Inn closed for a week. The corporation sent a crisis team that sprayed air freshener and replaced the carpet in room 109, but the housekeepers refused to re-enter that wing alone. Tina's funeral drew hundreds: family, motel staff, regular guests, and strangers who'd read about her in the news. The service took place in a small pastel-painted Baptist church, with overflow seating spilling into the fellowship hall. I sat beside Maria in silence while Tina's teenage son read a letter saying the towel was the last thing his mother ever tasted. Half the congregation wept uncontrollably. Weeks passed. Lawyers filed motions. The closure order was lifted. Tourists returned. The motel filled again. But room 109 stayed locked, sealed by court order with an evidence tape across the door. Sometimes new guests would ask why that ground floor room was closed off. I'd tell them it was plumbing issues. Now and then, Jeff would stop by to pick up Tina's last paycheck or drop off pastries for the staff. He'd lost weight, his eyes bloodshot like someone who only slept in short bursts. He'd linger at the counter, staring through the lobby glass toward 109. I never knew what to say, so I just set a lobby coffee in front of him, and he'd nod in silent thanks, though he never took a sip. The trial dragged on until early 2025. Finally, Havilka pled guilty to second-degree murder. The hearing was brief. No jury, just the judge, the attorneys, and a family shattered by loss. The judge handed down 2 life sentences, one for taking Tina's life, and another for committing the killing during a robbery. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked Jeff if he felt justice had been served. He didn't answer. He walked to his truck, knuckles white on the steering wheel. I watched the live stream on my phone during a break at my new job, a roadside hostel 2 towns north. When the judge pronounced life without parole, I felt both relief and emptiness. The camera showed Havelka being led away, wrists chained to a belt, his face as flat as ever. Under the cold light of the break room, he looked ordinary, insignificant. And that's when I understood. True horror lies in how normal a killer can look minutes after destroying a life. 4 years have passed, but some details still shake me vividly. The motionless cart outside 109, the bleach turning to copper, the silence where Tina's voice should have crackled over the radio. I remember the exact length of the hallway to the closet, 12 feet. One night after the motel reopened, I measured it myself. I needed to know how little it takes to erase a future. I don't work night shifts anymore. If a guest pays cash for more than 2 nights, I write the room number in red ink. I've learned to notice shoes being carried instead of worn, fresh scratches on hands, and guests who ask if the cameras face the back stairs. Sometimes those precautions seem paranoid, but then I remember Tina at 8:49 a.m., sending a loving text believing it would be an ordinary day. A minute later, a stranger walked through a door he never should have entered. People ask why I stayed in the hotel business after what happened, and part of me believes remaining is my way of honoring Tina, making sure the locks click shut, the cameras keep rolling, and towels are used only for what they're meant for. Most mornings are routine again. Coffee brewing, guests complaining about Wi-Fi, cleaning carts rattling over the concrete. But every time a housekeeper turns a master key into an occupied room, I hold my breath until I hear her voice on the radio, cheerful and alive. That's what real horror is when it's real. It's not ghosts or midnight thunder, but a sunlit motel room at 9 in the morning. And 14 silent minutes no one can ever rewind. Story 2. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon in early May. The sun had already slipped behind our row of houses, and the sky, as seen from my bedroom window, had that deep blue hue that always told me night was approaching fast. My name is Daniel, and I had just turned 12 the month before. My parents had gone out to a wedding that afternoon. One of my dad's co-workers was getting married. They promised to be back before 10 p.m., so they left me in charge of my younger brother, Kyle, who was 7. We'd done this a few times before, and nothing ever happened. I felt pretty grown up about it. Mom's rules were simple. Keep the doors locked, call her if anything strange happened, and get Kyle to bed before 9:30. That night we ate leftover pizza around 6. Kyle grabbed his tablet and went downstairs to watch cartoons. I left my door half open and turned on my PlayStation. Elden Ring seemed like the perfect game to fill those slow hours. I set my snacks on the desk, soda, half a bag of chips, and a tube of cookies, and put on my headphones. For the first hour, nothing happened. I explored digital ruins and fought giant enemies. Whenever I paused, I could faintly hear the cheerful voices of the cartoons drifting up from the living room. Every few minutes, I checked my phone clock to make sure I didn't forget Kyle's bedtime. At 8:30, I took a break, stretched, and opened the door a little wider to let some fresh air in. The hallway light was still on. Kyle's door at the end of the hall was dark and closed, meaning he was still downstairs. I shouted, "Bedtime in 1 hour." He didn't answer, but I heard the canned laughter from his cartoon stop for a second, then continue. He must have heard me. By 9:15, I was completely absorbed in a tough boss fight, totally immersed. That's when I felt it. Not exactly a sound, more like a change in the air behind me. When something in a house shifts even slightly, your body notices before your mind does. I paused the game, muted my headset, and listened. Only the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I turned my head. My door was no longer as I'd left it. It had opened about 2 inches. Through that small gap, I could see part of the hallway wall, and something else. An eye. No, 2 wide-open eyes. They were Kyle's, but something was wrong. His pupils were huge, so large they swallowed all the color of his irises. In the weak hallway light, they looked completely black. The rest of his face was frozen in an unnaturally wide grin, far too big for a normal smile, like a mask. He stood motionless, almost pressed against the crack. For half a second, I froze, not knowing how to react. I barely managed to whisper, "Kyle, dude, what are you doing?" He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He just kept that enormous grin. I could hear my pulse in my ears. My heart pounded fast. I stood up and took 2 steps toward the door. The hinges creaked as I pushed it open. The hallway was empty. No Kyle, no footsteps, no giggles. I leaned out and looked toward the stairs. The nightlight from downstairs cast a faint glow on the wall, but I saw no one. I whispered his name again. Silence. I hurried down the hallway and peeked into his room. Tidy, untouched. The bed still made. I checked my parents' room. Nothing. A cool draft was coming in through the bathroom window left open earlier. A branch scratched the siding outside, making a dry rustling sound. This had to be a prank. Kyle loved pranks. But those eyes, that grin. A chill tightened in my stomach. I forced myself to calm down. Little brothers scare older brothers on purpose. It's normal. I walked down the stairs carefully. Each step creaked louder than usual. The living room TV showed a pause streaming app. Kyle's tablet was on the couch, still playing cartoons. His favorite blue blanket was crumpled on the floor. No sign of him. I checked the sliding back door, locked. The front door, locked. The dining room windows, locked. Only then did I notice the time, 9:26 p.m. 4 minutes until bedtime, and he was nowhere to be found. I called out again, louder. The only reply was the refrigerator motor kicking on. I went into the kitchen, turned on the brightest light, and grabbed my phone to call Mom, but hesitated. If Kyle jumped out from behind the couch right then, Mom would think I couldn't handle one simple babysitting night. Instead, I called Kyle's kid's smartwatch number. It rang from the couch cushion where he'd left it earlier. Great. Suddenly, a loud thud came from the floor below, the half-bath near the laundry room. The toilet lid slammed shut, then silence. That toilet lid was loose and always dropped hard if someone touched it. I ran toward it. The laundry room light was off, but a thin glow outlined the bathroom door frame. Someone was inside. I knocked. "Kyle, are you in there?" Running water, a faucet, but no voice. I turned the knob and pushed. The door hit something and bounced halfway open. I squeezed through and found my brother standing with his back to me, facing the sink. He was wearing his Avengers pajamas. His head was bowed as he washed his hands. I exhaled, half relief, half irritation. "Dude, you scared me to death. Were you upstairs just now?" He turned slowly. His eyes looked normal, brown with regular-sized pupils. The grin was gone. He looked tired and puzzled. "I had to go to the bathroom," he said, wiping his hands on his shirt. I studied his face. No trace of black eyes. No hint of a prank. Just the usual innocent look of a 7-year-old boy. Still, goosebumps ran down my arms. I led him upstairs, brushing crumbs off the step before he could step on them. "Come on, bedtime. It's late." He groaned but followed me. I tucked him in, checked under the bed out of habit, turned off the light and left the door slightly open the way he liked. Back in my room, I closed the door all the way and leaned against it. Had I imagined those eyes? Could the hallway shadows and my game-addled brain have combined into something creepy? Maybe. I resumed Elden Ring and tried to keep playing, but the boss killed me twice in 10 minutes. I could still see Kyle's black eyes in my mind. Eventually, I saved and turned off the console, 10:07 p.m. Mom and Dad wouldn't be home for almost another hour. I lay down with the lights on, scrolling through social media to distract myself. A few funny dog videos helped. My breathing slowed. I told myself to stop being dramatic. Probably Kyle had sneaked upstairs to grab a snack, got startled when I stood up and ran off. Then I heard a faint brushing sound, like someone rubbing fabric. I sat up. My door was perfectly closed. The sound had to be coming from inside my room. I checked the closet. Nothing but hanging shirts and boxes of games. I glanced at the space under my bed and laughed at myself. Not a chance. The noise came again. This time I knew it was from the air vent above my desk. The metal slats vibrated softly, then stilled. The air ducts ran through the whole house. If someone talked near a vent in another room, you could hear it. Kyle's room had one just like it. Maybe he was whispering to a toy. I grabbed my phone and texted him, "Go to sleep, kid." I set the phone down and waited. 10 seconds later, the vent rattled again. 2 quick knocks, like knuckles tapping metal from the other side. My stomach clenched. I stood under the vent, listening. My own breathing sounded too loud. Suddenly, adrenaline pushed me forward, and I bolted into the hallway. Kyle's door was half open. I went in. The glow of his nightlight painted soft shapes on the furniture, the floor, and his sleeping face. He was under the blanket, eyes closed, breathing calmly. He was hugging his worn stuffed shark. Peaceful. The vent in his wall was about 4 feet off the ground. I approached and pressed my ear against it. I felt cool air, but no knocking. Had I imagined that too? I left the room and pulled the door nearly shut again. As I turned toward the hallway, I caught movement at the far end. Something ducked behind the linen closet just before I looked directly at it. My heart jumped. Forcing my legs to move, I walked to the closet and yanked it open. Towels, tablecloths, nothing else. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew I didn't want to keep playing detective. Mom's voice echoed in my head. "Trust your instincts." I went back to my room, called her, and told her everything. The dark eyes, the grin, the noises, the shadow. Mom sounded calm but firm. She ordered me to check all the windows, turn on every downstairs light, and keep Kyle with me until they got home. Dad, on speaker from the car, said they were already on their way. The wedding had ended early. 10 minutes, he said. Stay together. Lock yourselves in. I tiptoed back to Kyle's room and woke him gently. He was grumpy but didn't hesitate to follow when I said Mom wanted us together. I locked my bedroom door, shoved my desk chair under the handle, and sat him on the bed with my tablet. Kyle put on headphones and opened Minecraft. I kept all the lights on and stood by the window, watching the street. Empty sidewalks. A porch light flicked on 2 houses down. Somewhere a dog barked at nothing. While Kyle played, I went to the drawer to grab a blanket. As I moved my foot, something small and hard brushed the carpet. I picked it up. A black plastic disc about the size of a coin, a contact lens case. I held it under the lamp. Tiny words curved on the surface. Full sclera costume lens. My throat went dry. These lenses cover the entire eye, turning it one solid color. Pitch black. I flipped the container. No lens inside, just a bit of leftover solution. I searched and found the other half near the trash bin, also empty. 2 cases. Someone had used them and tossed them in my room. I looked at Kyle. He was humming while building a blockhouse. Could he have worn them? They were huge and hard to put in. A 7-year-old couldn't do that alone, let alone hide afterward. I had no answers. I stashed the cases in the drawer to show Dad later. Finally, headlights swept across my window. Dad's truck pulled into the driveway. I heard car doors, the jingle of keys, the front door opening. Dad called up the stairs firmly. I opened the door and told him everything again, showing him the lens packages. His expression hardened. He searched the entire house while Mom stayed with us. All the windows were closed, the backyard gate latched, the basement and garage doors secure. When he finished, he admitted finding something strange. Muddy footprints on the concrete just outside Kyle's window, adult-sized. One even showed the arch of a bare foot, no shoe tread. He took pictures with his phone. Mom wanted to call the police immediately, but Dad decided to wait until morning to review the doorbell footage. That night, I slept on the floor beside Kyle's bed with a baseball bat in my hand. I left the lights on until sunrise. The police came the next day. They took the lens containers and Dad's photos. The doorbell camera hadn't caught anyone, but the motion light on the side of the house had triggered at 9:05 p.m., right before I'd seen Kyle smiling. The camera angle was bad, so it only showed a flash of light and then darkness. The detectives suspected a prank by older neighborhood kids. The full sclera lenses were common in costume shops, they said, but they also took prints from the windows in the cases. None matched anyone in our family. For weeks afterward, I checked every lock twice whenever I was home. Kyle stopped watching cartoons alone at night and started sleeping with his lamp on. I stopped playing Elden Ring for a while, preferring brighter games that didn't pull me in so deeply. I have my own theory, one that scares me more than any ghost story. Maybe someone had planned to break in, thinking the house was empty because Mom posted on social media that they were at a wedding. Maybe they first tried Kyle's window, saw him watching cartoons and backed off. They could have slipped the contact cases through the screen slit to spook him, then circled the house looking for another way in. When the porch light came on, they fled, leaving footprints in the mud. But what still makes my stomach twist are those black eyes. I know what I saw. I can't say for sure whether someone was really wearing those lenses, watching me through the cracked door, or if my mind filled in the image when I glimpsed a stranger in the shadows. Either way, it felt like pure malice. Now I always keep my door either fully open or completely closed, never halfway. I check the hallway before gaming, and if I ever see eyes like those again, I'll lock the door immediately and call the police first, not later. Staying alert might have been the only thing that kept a bad night from becoming something much worse. Story 3. I worked as a caregiver in a small care home out in the middle of nowhere, about 10 miles from the nearest town. It was a quiet place, surrounded by fields and woods, where at night you only heard crickets and occasionally an owl breaking the silence. During the day, the job wasn't so bad, helping residents with meals, activities, and medication. But the night shift, that was another story. From 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., it was just one coworker and me, Harper. The routine was simple: put the residents to bed, tidy up a little, then sit in the staff room watching TV or chatting until someone pressed the call bell. Most nights nothing happened, but one night about a year ago something did happen, and it's something I will never forget. It was a cold October night, the kind where the wind howls through the trees and makes the old building creak. Harper and I had just finished our rounds. The residents, about 15 elderly people with varying degrees of dementia or mobility issues, were tucked in. We'd cleaned the kitchen, folded some laundry, and settled in the staff room with a cup of tea each. That room sat at the end of a long hallway, with a clear view of the main entrance through a glass door. We had the TV on low, some late-night show in the background, when the doorbell rang. It was 2:30 a.m. Harper and I froze, staring at each other. The bell was one of those old shrill chimes that echoed through the whole building. Not only was it unusual, it was wrong. Nobody came out here at that hour. The home was miles from anything, down a narrow road with little traffic even by day, much less in the middle of the night. Deliveries were always scheduled and visits never after 8 p.m. My first thought was that maybe a family member of a resident had shown up unannounced, but even that seemed unlikely. "Who the hell is that?" Harper whispered, eyes wide. "I don't know," I said, my stomach in knots. "Let's check the camera." In the staff room, there was a small security monitor showing the front door. I leaned over and turned it on. The grainy black and white image flickered, and there he was, a man standing on the threshold. He looked between 40 and 50 with short dark hair and a thick jacket. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, facing the door. There was something about how still he was, the way he held himself so motionless, that made my skin crawl. "Should we open it?" Harper asked in a thin voice. "No way," I said. "We don't know who he is. Let's talk over the intercom first." The facility's rules were strict: no after-hours visits and never let strangers in. I pressed the intercom button and said, "Hello, can we help you?" The man tipped his head slightly as if surprised to hear my voice. Yeah," he said, his voice crackling through the speaker. "My car broke down a couple miles from here. Can I use your phone to call a tow?" His story sounded plausible, but something didn't add up. Maybe it was the hour, or the fact that he'd walked 2 miles in the dark to get here. Still, we couldn't just ignore him. "We can't let you in," I said, trying to sound firm but polite. "But we can call the tow for you. Hold on while we get the phone." "Okay, thanks," he said in a flat tone. He didn't step away from the stoop. Harper and I looked at each other. "I'll grab the phone," she said, and headed down the hall to the office. I stayed by the monitor watching him. He kept standing there, not moving, without the restless fidgeting you'd expect from someone with a broken-down car. My gut screamed that something was off. I told myself I was being paranoid. Night shifts in that place made me jumpy. Creaking floors, dim lights, and the soft murmurs of sleeping residents bleeding through the monitors. It was easy to let your imagination run. Harper came back with the cordless. "Got it," she said. "Let's tell him we'll make the call." We walked toward the main entrance, staying on our side of the glass. I was about to speak when I realized there was no one at the door. The man had vanished. No trace. The exterior security light was still on, illuminating the gravel path and the lawn, but no one was there. "Where did he go?" Harper asked, voice tight. "Maybe he went back to his car," I said, not believing it. The roadway ran straight from the home. We would have seen him leave on the monitor. Besides, it had only been a minute or two since I'd spoken to him. "Let's call the tow anyway," Harper said. "Maybe he'll come back." I nodded, though my hands shook as I dialed the local shop. I explained the situation, gave the rough area, and they said they would send someone. When I hung up, Harper grabbed my arm. "Look," she hissed, pointing down the hall toward the TV room. My heart stopped. There in the TV room doorway stood the man. Same jacket, same short dark hair. Just standing there with his back to us, facing into the room. The TV's glow outlined his silhouette, turning him almost into a shadow against the flickering light. He hadn't seen us yet. "How the hell did he get in?" I whispered, barely audible. The front door was locked. We'd checked it before starting the shift, as always. The back door had the deadbolt thrown, and the windows were secured. There was no way he could have come in without breaking something, and we hadn't heard a sound. Harper's face went pale. "What do we do?" "Hide," I said, mind racing, "and call the police." We backed away slowly, never taking our eyes off him. He stayed perfectly still. We slipped into the office. It was closer than the staff room, and locked the door. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone as I dialed 911. I whispered to the dispatcher what was happening. Unknown man inside the facility, possible forced entry, 2 staff and 15 vulnerable residents. She told us to stay put and that officers were on the way, but it would take about 15 minutes because of how far out we were. 15 minutes felt like forever. Harper and I crouched behind the desk, barely breathing, listening for any sound. The home was eerily silent. No footsteps, no creaks, nothing. I couldn't stop imagining the man walking the halls, maybe going into the rooms. Most residents were too frail or too confused to defend themselves. The thought alone made my stomach churn. "Do you think he's still there?" Harper whispered. "I don't know," I said. He didn't seem to move. We waited, seconds dragging. Every creak of the building made us jump. I checked the clock over and over, counting down to the police arrival. Finally, we heard sirens in the distance. I peeked through the office window and saw 2 patrol cars coming up the drive, red and blue lights flashing. We stepped out carefully and met the officers at the main door. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman, serious but calm. We explained everything, the doorbell, the man, how he had appeared inside. They asked us to stay by the entrance while they searched the building. We clutched each other's hands as their flashlights swept the halls. The search felt endless, though it was probably only 10 minutes. They came back shaking their heads. "There's no one here," the female officer said. "We checked every room, every closet, even the basement. No signs of forced entry either. No broken windows or tempered locks." "But we saw him," I said, my voice trembling. "He was in the TV room." "He could have left before we got here," one officer said. "Might have slipped out the back." "We would have heard it," Harper shot back. "The back door makes a ton of noise when it opens." The officers glanced at one another but didn't argue. They took some details, our statements, and told us to call again if anything else happened. They also suggested telling our manager to send extra staff for safety. After they left, Harper and I sat in the staff room, too shaken to do much of anything. I called our manager, Linda, who lived about 20 minutes away. She wasn't thrilled to be woken at 3 a.m., but she agreed to come and stay with us until the morning shift arrived. Linda showed up around 3:30, looking grumpy but concerned. She made us tea and sat with us in the staff room, asking for every detail. We repeated the story and she checked the locks herself, confirming everything was secure. "Maybe it was a prank," she said, though she didn't sound convinced. "Kids from town or something." "Kids don't come out here," I answered. "And he wasn't a kid. He was a man." We tried to calm down, turning the TV back on to break the silence. Linda was telling us about a new resident arriving the following week when we heard it. The front door. It opened with that unmistakable creak and then slammed. The sound boomed down the hall. Harper gasped and my heart leapt into my throat. Linda went pale. "Stay here," she said, standing up, but I grabbed her arm. "No way," I said. "We're not splitting up." We grabbed the phone again and dialed 911, whispering to the dispatcher that someone had just opened the front door. While Harper talked, I moved to the window that looked out on the driveway. My breath caught. There, running down the gravel path, was the man. Same jacket, same build. He was sprinting toward the road, his figure swallowed by the darkness beyond the reach of the security light. "He's outside," I hissed, pointing. Harper and Linda crowded the window, but he was already gone, eaten by the night. The police came back, this time with a dog. They searched the entire perimeter but found nothing. No footprints, no tire marks, no signs of anyone. The dog didn't pick up a trail either. The officers were kind but skeptical. They probably thought we were spooked. Night shift workers imagining things. They stayed until the morning shift arrived at 6 a.m. By then, Harper and I were exhausted, our nerves shot. I quit a week later. I couldn't do nights anymore, not after that. Harper left a month later. We never learned who that man was or what he wanted. The most terrifying part is that he was inside the building the whole time the police were there, hiding somewhere they didn't check. Maybe in a crawl space in the attic. I don't know. All I know is I'm glad I don't work there anymore. Night shifts in a care home are unsettling enough without strangers showing up in the middle of nowhere, coming and going like ghosts.